that loud announcement. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the warm welcome. I also wanted to share that we do have also Jennifer Avina is with us today as a panelist. She is the preschool programs enrollment coordinator with Walla Walla Public Schools Center for Children and Families. So welcome, Jennifer, for also joining our panel. I'm another Jennifer Casarino. You can call me Jen. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm new. I'm the new Birth to 5 ECAP Senior Administrator here at DCYF. And I'm in my second month in this role. So I'm still onboarding and learning myself. Thank you. And I come with a background in early learning and special education. And I've served as an early learning principal in the Marysville School District for the past 5 years. This experience has given me a wealth of just knowledge and resources around working with children who are, experience different kinds of challenges and also opportunities. Our children that come to us many times have a variety of needs that they're exhibiting, and our job as early learners is to meet kids where they're at, and that's really something I want to bring to this role. When I joined Marysville Early Learning Center 5 years ago, we went from a school providing separate preschool programs and moved to an inclusive preschool program with nearly 200 children who were, ECAP children, and then having students that are blended in a blended classroom for a special education inclusion model. And we offered a full continuum of services and served over 450 children last year for preschool students and families. And I'm passionate about early learning. I'm passionate about working with all children and helping our kids thrive in a wonderful classroom setting with amazing staff and administrators who are working with their staff and families and children. I'm honored to be here today and to moderate this panel of experts in the field. And I wanted to thank each one of them for dedicating their time to serve on the panel and move through some questions with us. This is specifically related to coordinated recruitment and enrollment. And what that means is when students are coming to us, either they're coming from the Birth to 3 programs, or they're coming just as a community member who's interested in preschool. There's a lot of different facets of getting kids the services they need, matching the service with the student and family. And coordinated recruitment and enrollment is really looking at how do we do that in a way that takes the burden off the family and provides the service of let's find the right fit for you, instead of you having to go around and search for what fits you and your family. One of the ways that we're working on this right now within my team in DCYF is we're hiring a manager who's going to be working with coordinated recruitment and enrollment and a coordinator. We're also working with CCA and OSPI and other agencies to come together so that we can be coordinated in our work together. And we have other people out in those agencies who are going to be strategically working with us. This is kind of a big lift. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of pieces, and I'm sure those of you who have experience working within larger early learning facilities, you know that we have to be really careful when it comes to sharing information and confidentiality. And these are all pieces that we're looking at as a team of like, how do we share information, but protect information at the same time? So we're really trying to balance those pieces to make sure that we're doing what's best for kids and families, but also doing it thoughtfully and carefully so that it's not something that's going to, kind of be a problem later down the road. So I wanted to just take a moment and introduce. I know that some of our panelists are out there. There may be a few people who were not able to attend today. So Julie Worrell, I saw you out there. Hello, Julie. Autumn, I'm not sure if you're here yet. Ethna, I wasn't sure if you. Oh, there you are. Yay. Hi, Ethna. Susan Brown, I saw that you were here. And then Jennifer Avina, I saw that you were here as well. Hello, Jennifer. Okay, so the way this is going to work is we're going to have about 15 minutes or so, 10 to 15 minutes per question. I'm going to ask a question, and then I'm just going to let the panelists each have a little bit of time to answer. And then we will move on to the next question. And at the very end, we will have, we may have about, 5 or 10 minutes for some questions from all of you. And that's how we will move through the questions. Does that sound okay with everyone? Okay, wonderful, thank you. All right, so the first question to the panel is, could you start by telling us about the early learning landscape in your school district or the area that you serve, highlighting community collaboration, perhaps with childcare providers. And Ethna, you're the first person next to me in the box. Would you mind going first?
I'm absolutely happy to go first. And thank you for the invite here. I've heard a lot about ELAC, so this is kind of fun for me to see who ELAC is, and I just caught 15 minutes of before this, and I'm pretty impressed. Those questions for Ray were phenomenal. So, San Juan County, I think people see it as a rich county because it is a tourist destination. However, what we serve are the working families, and so all of the people that are in the service industry. So they're the people who are doing the cleaning and the restaurants, and so we have 3 different ferry served islands and 3 different school districts. So it's really, there are 3 different demographics, 3 different cultures, and the early education on each island is really very, very different. And so being the county manager, it's what the solutions are very different for each island. And so we've been working with San Juan Island School District because we are entering into our 2nd year with them working. I have ECAP slots in their developmental preschool, and we're now sharing a building called the Early Learning Center for San Juan Island School District, and we'll have TTK on one side and early learning on the other. And I apologize, my dog never barks, and of course chooses now to bark in the background. And then we have Lopez Island, much smaller. It's been a little bit in flux. They considered TTK, weren't really in a position to go for that. And then Orcas Island School District here had considered going forward with TTK, but didn't really work here on this island because we have such a robust early learning community with high WACKID scores and no wait list. So that's kind of like a picture of what it looks like in my neck of the woods.
Thank you, Ethna. Let's see. I think Susan, you're the next person that I see. So would you mind going next and answering the same question? Would you like the question again?
Yeah, would you repeat it?
Yeah. So the question is, could you start by telling us about the early learning landscape in either, you can say, your school district, or highlight community collaboration that you have with other providers?
Sure. Okay, well, Kids Co is a nonprofit childcare organization, and all 11 of our programs are co-located on site at Seattle Public Elementary Schools. So I have 35 years of experience working within and among school district administrators, working with, I forget now how many superintendents we've been through since I started. The most consistent thing in Seattle Public Schools is Kids Co. We've been the same for 35 years. The early learning landscape in King County, primarily where we are located, is there is a supply and demand issue for mostly infant toddler, not so much for preschool. It is, I'm going to use the term zip code dependent. So there are some areas of our county that there is more need than others. And of course, there's also a wide variety of economic diversity within King County. In Seattle specifically, we have the Seattle Preschool Program, which is a City of Seattle funded program that is income qualifying. And there are many providers who also use ECAP or provide ECAP services and Head Start. But I would say just from and then King County itself is about to embark on the King County Child Care Wage Boost Project to try to, I mean, in the best way that I can explain it, even though it seems like the answer is obvious, does increasing compensation impact retention within the child care sector? And that will be happening within King County, and they're in the plans and works of doing that right now. Having met with the Greater Seattle Child Care Business Coalition to get our feedback on their program design and some things that they want to implement. I think just generally speaking, as a child care provider of 35 years history, this supply and demand issue has always been there. It's been always primarily infant and toddler, but I think with the onset of programs like transition to kindergarten, we are going to see a greater impact on the supply of infant toddler programs, because how childcare will be unsustainable with moving preschool kids into the public school system. So I guess, I mean, I hope I answered your question about the landscape in King County, but that's my contribution to this.
Thank you so much, Susan. Julie, would you be willing to go next? Do you want the question again, Julie?
No, I think I've got it.
Okay.
So I'm, again, a licensed family child care provider in Clark County, North Clark County, and Battleground. We're kind of a smaller suburb right outside of Vancouver's kind of the hub of Clark County. So we're just outside of it. And I'll just say right now also, I'm in my backyard with a group of kids running around and some teenage helpers. But if there's background noise or interruptions, I apologize. I would say the center or the licensed child care availability here in our area is really limited. A lot of families are commuting into Vancouver and down into Portland for work. And so I think a lot of the childcare, they're accessing childcare in those spaces as well. So it's a little bit limited right here where we are, particularly with infant and toddler care. I think in our entire school district area, there's one center who accepts babies. So we've got a total of 8 licensed childcare slots here within our school district. So we've got I think the big early learning in our is, we've got ECAP slots at classrooms and Head Starts, or some of the contracting partners that are around town. And our school district has got TK classes that are each year expanding, growing. They started out, I think, with just one single classroom on the campus of 3 schools, and now it's expanded to all 6, 7 elementary schools, and potentially multiple classrooms on those. I'm not really sure what that's looking like. So it's continuing to grow. And I feel that's really impacting the licensed childcare really significantly, particularly for me. I only accept 3-year-old preschools and up. And so when there is an option that's free for families, that's challenging to compete with. And I'm losing kids to that program every year. They'll start with me at 3 years old. And then as much as the families love the programming that I'm providing, I do a play and nature inspired program. I can't compete with free. I think it's really interesting. I've been doing this work for over 20 years and as a military spouse, and we moved around a lot. I've worked within a lot of different early learning communities. And for some reason here in our little corner of the state, feels very isolating. It's really hard to engage other community childcare providers in really meaningful ways. I'm on our board in our area for the Clark County Family Child Care Association. And so there is a small group of, I believe we're at 25, 30 providers in the area that are members of that association. But even that is really challenging. If it's not like a fun social event, it's really hard to get people together to really connect and do meaningful work in the area. From my experience, unfortunately, I think that, my perspective is that our community childcare providers are being treated really as partners in early learning. I think there's a lot of collaboration that goes on between the school districts and the ECAP and the SPED programs and things. But I think that the childcare providers here are really treated as kind of like this backup plan if something else doesn't work. I know at one point when our district was just initially starting the TK program, they convened an early learning partnership meeting, which I feel like I kind of weaseled my way into just because of some connections that I have with an ESD. There were no other community childcare providers present at that meeting. It was all the ECAP and SPED partners with the school district. And at one point they asked about concerns. What are your concerns? And I expressed those about how that's really going to challenge the small privately owned childcares here in town and how that's going to impact families. And the response I got was just kind of a thanks for sharing your experience with us. And there was no follow-up. And at the end of the meeting, the district lead was kind of saying they had hoped to continue that partnership and convene additional meetings in the future. This was 2 years ago. Either those meetings didn't happen or I wasn't invited back because I have not heard anything. So I expressed concerns. I felt like I was kind of placated and there was no follow-up. So it has unfortunately been challenging to collaborate with some of the bigger agencies in the school district here where I'm at. So.
Julie, thank you so much for sharing. And we have Jennifer Avina that is going to be sharing next. And as I said at the end, we will kind of follow up on some of these pieces that we're hearing because there's just a lot here for us to process. And so I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that we will move through all the questions first. Thank you. Jennifer, let's see. Maybe you're off.
I am off camera. I'm having difficulty, so I do apologize in advance. But I am excited to be here and share about all the beautiful work that's happening in Walla Walla. Our center is called Walla Walla Center for Children and Families, and we house our Washington State ECAP program, Head Start Federal program, Transition to Kinder program, and also our developmental preschool. And I'm happy to share today that in 2025, we will also be opening an infant toddler program. So a lot of great work happening. We are an early learning and family resource center. And we have strong partnerships with our community providers. We work closely with Early Head Start. And what that looks like is every spring we facilitate a building tour and presentation for Early Head Start families that will be entering our center in the fall. In addition to that, for my role, I meet frequently with the Early Learning Coalition Program Manager, Iladon, and the purpose of that is to exchange, the most recent updates with community providers and any upcoming events so that we can work together. In addition to that, we frequently refer children to in-home childcare providers. A lot of times when families apply, they will have a 4-year-old, but then they also have a 1-year-old. And so we work together to refer to other providers, and providers refer back to us as well. Another beautiful aspect of our center is that we have our special education team here on site, and so we are able to support little ones needing that extra social, emotional, or behavioral support. In addition to that, I participated last year in the Dinner and Dialogue, where I was able to present our intake, enrollment, and recruitment process to our local providers. We are a semi-new center, and so right now I've been really focusing on getting the word out there and ensuring that everyone is aware of the opportunities we have, but also of our process. We never want to impact enrollment, right, with our partners. And so really, truly, we are in this together. And right now it's about getting the word out there. And that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Jennifer. I see that there are some questions in the chat, and we will use these questions at the end for the panelists. Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the next question. How have you navigated partnerships within your early learning community, and what have you learned? So Ethna, I'm going to go back and start with you, and we'll just kind of go in the same order.
Okay.
To answer the question of navigating partnerships and what's been learned.
Okay, I would say first and foremost has been respect. So having respect for the community programs that currently exist, and kind of valuing what they're already doing, what they're offering to children and families in the community, and then supporting them. So as an ECAP, I'm an ECAP contractor that subcontracts with licensed programs. And so we're able to, although we ask a lot of them, of requirements, we're able to support them in a myriad of ways with professional development, with purchases of materials and curriculum. And then when we got the complex needs funding, I asked our providers what was the top 3 priorities. We had a brainstorm list, and basically mental health was at the top. And so we've been using a mental health provider virtually. And the preschools agreed that their staff can attend a mental health session with their provider, and have their classroom covered and get paid for that hour. And it's something that these hardworking families typically with young children couldn't do outside of hours. So there's a strong effort to support mental health. And then I would also say the communication has been huge. So continuing to meet with these providers regularly, keeping communication open and flowing and transparent, like, no secrets, here we are. And we're pretty, we've turned into what I could consider a really robust, strong early learning community. And that's here on this island because we're so established here. And so the results of all of that is it's really high quality collaboration. And I would say that's what I've learned. It looks very different on other islands, and that's where our focus is next. Yeah.
Susan, would you like to go next? Thank you, Ethna.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So I would say what we're doing in the King County, Greater Seattle area is during the pandemic, because of childcare providers needing solutions to big problems, including funding, myself and a group of other people, we started the Greater Seattle Childcare Business Coalition. Because so many of our system things, and Ray Soriano's presentation is an example of it, where we're trying to fix the people who work in the system and not the system itself. So as childcare providers in the Greater Seattle Childcare Business Coalition, what we have done is we have found our voice and empowering ourselves to create change. So for example, we got the city of Seattle and the mayor to recognize childcare as essential and got the first ever retention bonuses for childcare workers in any city in the nation. And that was through the Greater Seattle Childcare Business Coalition. And then other retention and recognition payments came later through King County and the state. We also divide and conquer, and we meet with legislators, and we're continually telling the story of the problems with the system and how we need to fix the system. Providers don't need to be fixed. We are great childcare professionals. So that is what our contribution is to supporting childcare workers in our area is through all of this action-oriented, we're not going to take no for an answer, and we're going to fight, fight, fight till we get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Julie, you're next.
Yeah. So again, as a family childcare provider, I feel like a lot of times my capacity for partnering is a little bit limited because I am working with kids directly, kids and families for, 50 to 60 hours a week. So certainly recognizing the importance of those partnerships and like the challenge of being able to, when those opportunities are available, to be able to participate. Like today, I've got, this is important, but I've also got kids running all around me. I have relied really heavily on our childcare aware team here in our region and my early achievers coach, and just taking advantage of those opportunities when they are coordinating and bringing those things up. And so I think what I've learned from it is really just to jump at any chance when I see someone who is in a place and ready and willing to partner to really just take advantage of that. And I'm eager to do that, to connect with other providers to not only improve, strengthen the work that we're doing, but really the whole landscape of our childcare here in our area as a whole. So.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julie. Jennifer, you're next.
Okay, perfect. And I did review the question on the chat, so I don't know if there's an opportunity now for me to answer it, or if you wish for me to wait till the end.
Why don't we wait till the end and we'll gather any questions that come up and then we'll use those as questions from the end.
Perfect. So I briefly mentioned we currently have partnerships with the Early Learning Coalition, Early Head Start. Birth to 3 is also a very important one. We work closely with our Birth to 3 providers, our special education team, and our enrollment team here at the center to make sure that the transition into our center is a seamless one for families, and also that little ones are served the moment they start in school. What I have found is that all of our providers, we want the best for these little ones. We are the foundation, and so just like us, we want to make sure that families' needs are met. And really, everyone is really open to a partnership. Right now, it's just how can we build those partnerships and keep them going through the year.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, so the next question is, how do you bring different early learning systems together with your work and the work you do?
So I would say for us, for the people I work with on an ECAP provider, the people I subcontract with those programs, it's part of their contract that we meet together monthly. But I would say when COVID hit, that was really difficult for them to achieve. But when COVID hit, we came up with a virtual system, and then we have a monthly date, and we kept those meetings because they were so supportive. It was an opportunity to really bring us together and bond more. And what one provider over here was struggling with, another one could help with, and vice versa, because it is an isolating, pretty high stress job being a provider of a program. Most of you that are on the panel know this, but I'm often talking to our providers, and they're having to drop into the kitchen and make lunch or sweep the floor, and still trying to do admin and go for grants, and it's super stressful. So those virtual monthly meetings with the providers that I work with are consistent and strong. And then we have local coalition meetings. So we have an early learning coordinator in the county, and it's only a part of her hat, but she convenes the early learning coalition, which is local. And then we join regional meetings. So we're part of the Northwest Regional Coalition. In addition to that, here on Orcas, which really has helped, there's something called ECI, which is the Early Childhood Education Initiative Program. And that basically, it was an offshoot of our community foundation. And it was a couple of philanthropic folks that was really interested in supporting early learning. And so that's been going now for about 9 years. And so the providers come together in this meeting, and we're all part of that steering committee. And they ask for scholarships that will help increase access for the kids, for anybody who doesn't qualify ECAP or Working Connections childcare. Then there's also ECI. So it really helps really support the programs. And then that program is also offered professional development. And so we've come together to do professional development. And just recently, this is fairly new here on Orcas, we have a special programs director out of the school district who will be meeting with bringing our early learning community together. So we'll be working more with the school district here going forward this year.
Okay, well, my answer is pretty short. It's the Greater Seattle Child Care Business Coalition. It is comprised of childcare providers from across the Greater Seattle area. When we first started, we were meeting weekly. We did that for about 3 years. Now we've gone down to meeting twice a month. And we brought in people we try to connect with different layers of, so Paul Noski, who works in the federal office for childcare. He's attended some of our meetings and we have regular communication with him. We've brought in folks from DCYF, from the City of Seattle Department of Education and Early Learning, so that we can have conversations with the powers that be to help them, well, to hopefully educate, inform, and inspire them about the essential work of childcare, and to make sure that when there are conversations, nothing about us without us is really what it comes down to. So that's what we're doing to connect with the different entities within the organizations. I mean, Nicole Rose, we worked with her to coordinate site tours, not this summer, but last summer, so she could see. Her and Matt Judge came out and toured facilities. We just, any way we can connect with decision makers to help influence and inform the decisions they make.
And I think my response to this one is very similar to my last one. You know, as a family childcare provider, my capacity for doing systems level work is pretty limited. So again, I think really just being dependent on those larger early learning agencies here in town, and just keeping my eyes and ears and feelers out for opportunities, and prioritizing those opportunities to connect and contribute to the conversation. Again, particularly for the community childcare providers, because I feel like sometimes they're left out of the conversation in ways here in our community that I think could definitely be strengthened.
Thank you, Julie. Jennifer, would you like to go?
Yes, so I'm going to share a little bit of the work within CCF, and then also with our community partners. So at the center, as I mentioned, we have 4 different early learning programs. However, our intake and application process is one smooth process for all. On a weekly basis, as an enrollment team here at the center with representation from ECAP, TK, Head Start, we go through all intakes and assign families to the program that will best meet their needs. If during the intake process we determine a family would not qualify for one of our programs at the center, we don't leave the family stranded. We make sure to support them and connect them to the community and provide them a lengthy list of all the community partners and information, in addition to financial assistance through Working Connections. So our goal at CCF is to ensure that each family that applies leaves with a resource. With our outer agencies, as mentioned, Early Head Start, we frequently check in with the enrollment coordinator there and refer as needed. birth to 3 as well. We work very closely with their team. Also, a town called College Place. They have their own TK program. They just have one classroom. And so, again, we are very mindful of their program as well. And I frequently check in with their team to take a look at enrollment. You know, families may apply with us interested in TK. However, if they're College Place residents, we will refer them back to the College Place TK.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question is, could you talk about how you navigate different eligibility needs for children and families? How do you ensure parent choice is part of the process?
So I can tell you that in ECAP, that enrollment part is part of the process. So we have, you know, family support staff, enrollment staff that kind of go through the ECAP enrollment, and then it's already built into the system. We don't necessarily have in this county a coordinated recruitment and enrollment process yet, but it's definitely something that I'm hoping to learn more from here. And I've been having conversations with partners in the state that are doing it well, because I think we've really learned from mistakes, and there's a concerted effort to want to do that better. Right now, we're still working on San Juan Island and trying to get programs even licensed there. So we're not in the dark ages, but we have a lot of work to do there. Once a program's licensed, then they can access ECAP and Working Connections childcare, and it brings them a lot of support that way. All of our programs that I subcontract with are in early achievers. They're all level 4s or 5s, and you know, with that local philanthropic group, this particular island is doing exceptionally well. About parent choice, because we have subcontracts with a bunch of, I have 5 different sites. When a parent enrolls in the ECAP program, they get to choose. Unfortunately, right now, we, you know, there's only one program on Lopez and one program on San Juan Island, but on Orcas, those families get to choose between actually 4 different programs here. There's Kaleidoscope has a in-house childcare, but then they also have a forest school, an outdoor nature-based program. We have a Montessori school, and then Children's House. So there's lots of parent choice here. I think that's it about the parent choice, but I'm happy to answer questions when we're all done here.
Ethna, I think there's a question in the chat for you if you'd like to look at it, and then we can put it at the end.
I'm not sure that this question applies well to Kids Co because we're a provider, but what I can say is that because there are supports for families who income qualify, whether that be Working Connections, Head Start, or ECAP. And then for those who are lucky enough to have a high enough income to not need support, you know, they're in their lovely position. But for a lot of families in between, there isn't support. And so one of the things that Kids Co does to remove cost as a barrier is we provide our own tuition assistance program. And it is one of the things that, you know, sadly impacts how much I can pay staff, because while I'm trying to balance compensation for employees, I'm also trying to create affordable programs that are also accessible to families. So I think until we actually address the system, which is right now a failed market system that relies on childcare providers subsidizing the system with low wages and compensation, and families subsidizing the system with their tuition, family choice is a little bit of, I'm going to say it's an oxymoron, because it still boils down to what can you afford and what is available. So, I mean, I hate to be sort of the negative Nancy in that regard, but this is not a problem we can solve with coordinated enrollment of any kind, because the financing of childcare is the biggest problem, second only to licensing regulations being overly burdensome. So that's my contribution to that question, and hopefully it resonates with other people on this call.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, I saw some nods there. Julie?
Yeah. So gosh, I'm trying to, I think for me, it's just some ways that I support families with, kind of navigating eligibility. For one, part of my enrollment packet that's going out to all families is, just the income guidelines and information about applying for childcare subsidies. That's something that universally just goes out to all of my families when they're interested in enrolling with me. And I think when I have families that are coming in who maybe already have concerns about their child's development, or they have already identified maybe some areas where the kiddo is struggling with speech or behavior or whatever it is, just being open and honest with families about what I'm able to do as a single provider all by myself and where my limitations might be, and then just giving them the contact information to connect through the school district or through our ESD, the ECAP partners, so that they can be screened for eligibility for those programs. And then also, I think it's, for me, really important to be whenever a family comes to tour with me, letting them and making sure they understand the limitations of a family childcare provider. These are the things that are great. These are the things that maybe are a little bit of a challenge around, consistency of care in terms of, like, if I'm sick, like, you have to have a backup. And so there are a few childcare providers in my area that are very comparable to me. And I'm always very upfront with families, like, if you're checking out me, please go check out these programs as well, to make sure that you're finding something that is a good fit. So I try to be a good partner with other, programs around me, and honor the and respect and support families in making good choices for their families. But again, as a community childcare provider and a family childcare provider, I'm a little bit limited in what I can really immediately support for families, other than just here's a good contact for you, give them a call.
Thank you, Julie. Jennifer?
So through our weekly intake review here at the center, again, we have representation from ECAP enrollment specialist, TK, and Head Start enrollment staff. Through the intake review, we analyze each family individually. We take a look at their income levels, any risk factors. We take in consideration parent session preferences. Our building is blessed with opportunities for half day or full day, so we do try to, accommodate those parent requests. A lot of times we will see families applying for the second time, and if they already have a positive connection, with a certain program, or they request a specific program, we do our best to accommodate those needs.
Thank you. Okay, next question. This is the last question, and then we'll go, we'll take some questions from the group, and we know we have some in the chat already. How have you navigated partnerships within your early learning community, and what have you learned?
Actually, Jennifer, that question, I think we answered earlier. It's a repeat question. Is that correct? And I'm happy to
Very similar.
revisit.
I think that why don't we just go to what have you learned, because that was actually a question in the chat. And so we can go ahead and start with that, and everybody can answer. Just through this process, what have you learned?
Yeah, so I can tell you that I have learned, when early learning programs, because they're so they are pretty isolated out there, when they are supported and brought together in community, that they can become a powerhouse. And I feel like that should be available to all of our early learning providers out there. I have learned that licensing is such a huge burden that most don't want to go through that process. It's costly, and it can take anywhere from at least a year to 2. And so trying to encourage a program to get licensed it's like saying, come and get a couple of root canals, and you have to pay for them. I would say also that in regards to the question over here, what we learned is really from the Whatcom area. When TTK first got launched, the intention was absolutely wonderful. It was trying to fill the gap of where children weren't being served. And then it turned into its own beast, and school districts went ahead and offered TTK without communicating with local smaller programs. And what that did was shut them down. Unfortunately, we lost a lot of programs. So that was the mistake learned. We have since learned that where it's working well is like Seattle, Tacoma area, and up in, maybe it was Olympia, but up in Ferndale also, where you create a service area agreement with the school district and the early learning community. But of course, if the early learning community aren't together in one coalition, that's almost impossible to happen. But there's a service area agreement where once a child is enrolled in an early learning program, that school district will not, on their enrollment for TTK, that's a question they ask, they have to follow up and confirm it, and then they don't enroll them in TTK, so that we can keep those early learning programs still sustained and operating. OSPI is different to DCYF, like for ECAP for us. Like ECAP, we are bound by lots of rules and regulations. With OSPI, and I think I saw Samantha here, what we learned is that each school district gets to be its own entity and make their own rules around this. So I think the early learning community in general would love to see a requirement for service area agreements or memorandum of understanding so that we can protect our early learning providers.
Okay, this is where I'm going to chime in with 35 years of experience working within a school district. So I can tell you that because of local control, and we have agreements that are signed, they have no meaning, they have no weight because there's no enforcement. So thinking a little bigger picture, TK does not have to follow the same regulations that childcare does. So I'm going to go even bigger picture and say that when you say that a predominantly white women workforce in the public school system does not have to follow the regulations that a predominantly BIPOC women's system in childcare has to follow, I begin to question the systemic racism that is influencing the decisions that are being made with regard to transition to kindergarten and licensed childcare. So I'm just going to lay that out there just like that. That might just be my opinion, but I feel like I need to say it out loud for people to hear. There has never been one instance in Seattle with our agreements that we have where if there wasn't something Seattle schools wanted to do, they didn't instantly break the agreement. So there is literally nothing that anybody can do, even with a memorandum of understanding, a service agreement, anything to hold public schools accountable to the agreements that are being made. And I think, I mean, I kind of thought that my role in this, because they needed someone who was who had experience with public schools, because we didn't really ask the question about what's it really like to work within a school district and within a system. They all know the talking points, but they don't always walk the talk. And that's just the plain facts of it. And unless there is an enforcement mechanism, there is no amount of coordinated enrollment rules or people that are hired to do it. There is nothing we can do to solve school districts from, I'll use the term, poaching kids from providers in their neighborhood. That is the plain truth of it. Again, hate to be the negative Nancy, but it's a voice, it is reality. And so what we need from DCYF is not to, and I realize, I understand there's politics involved in this, but if they're going to support, if DCYF is here to support us, they can't stand with OSPI and hold us accountable to all the things that they hold us accountable. It's a double standard that I can't live with. and I will continue to raise as an issue. So I'm not sure if this is what DCYF was hoping to hear from me is in asking me to participate on this panel, but I do have 35 years of experience working within a school district, and they're your partner till it's not convenient for them to be your partner. Happy to take questions if you have.
Oh, well, Susan, thank you so much. I really do appreciate just your candid response. And this is certainly something that is top of mind, and really the work that we need to do together. I really do appreciate your sharing. Everybody, actually, I do appreciate it very much. Julie, did you want to respond with what
I think, yeah, just echo a lot of what Susan was saying, and just some of those challenges that we're really facing in the private sector. But I would say just things that I've learned is like, I think recognizing where opportunities are for me, and unfortunately trying to work around the barriers that I have as such a small provider, and just the importance of keeping myself open to partnering, prioritizing, despite the fact that I've already got a really long week with kids, like to be able to kind of move the needle forward and improve some of these things that we're all experiencing, being challenged by, like really the importance of making time for those things, and not treating it as kind of like I don't have time for that. My priority is kids, and I can't do anything bigger. And then trying to just sit back and complain about it. If we're going to come with it, with the complaints, like be part of the solution, and so just keeping myself open to those opportunities where I can. So.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie. Jennifer, if you would like to answer what you have learned, and then also there was a question about how has opening your site impacted enrollment in centers within your community? Would you like to respond to both of those?
Yes, of course. So what I've learned is that we are all eager to build stronger partnerships with one another. In addition to that, there is such a need for infant toddler care in the community. So I'm excited that I know CCF will be opening a classroom for infant toddlers, but also a lot of families have expressed just the need for more financial support to pay for these programs. We have a large pool of families that are like right in the middle. They don't meet the income eligibility guidelines to receive any assistance. At the same time, with everything going up in cost right now, it's making it harder and harder for families to pay childcare. So a larger need for that financial assistance. In regards to impacting our community partners, I'm sure each center has their own experience and perspective, but what I can tell you is that I'm hearing both ends. A lot of centers still have lengthy wait lists, and others have slots, just like we do. What I do know is that, the children are out there. I think right now it's more, our recruitment and enrollment approach, as well as making sure families know of all the supports available.
Jennifer, there was a follow-up question about curious how private providers are feeling in Walla Walla. Do you have conversations with the private providers? And if so, what kinds of concerns are they bringing?
So I briefly touched on that. Again, I think each center has their own experience and perspective. What I have heard within the last month is a lot of providers still have healthy wait lists. Others have available slots, just like we do here at the center. So again, it's the partnerships and then our recruitment and enrollment and referral process that we are strengthening at this time.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to open it up for other questions for our panelists. And I also want to let you know that Samantha Bowen is here, as am I. We were asked to, to be here if any questions came up that we might be able to answer, but there may be some that we won't at this time. But certainly we are taking the information, and that these are all things that we are planning on working together as we are working with this new coordinated recruitment and enrollment team that we're going to be starting. Any questions? You can raise your hand or just speak or put it in the chat, whatever works for you.
So Jennifer, I just want to bring your attention to, there was a question from Colleen earlier that I just want to point you to. As well as a statement. And then I have a question in there myself for Jennifer, but would like for you to address Colleen's question first, please.
And just to save a scroll in the chat, I believe Colleen's question for Jennifer was, how has opening your site impacted enrollment at centers within your community? Correct me if I'm wrong, Colleen.
No, that actually this one says it isn't a question to be answered here, but rather something I'd like to flag in this conversation. But I'm curious how, so you just rephrased it. Okay, I'm just making sure we covered it. So forgive me. It's part of our job is ensuring that questions are shared out. Colleen also has a comment about not expecting providers to just shift to providing care for infant and toddlers only as TK expands. That undermines so much of the business practices. So curious about what is happening. Maybe Jennifer, you might be able to answer that, or in other communities to help providers make this shift as their older children are maybe possibly moving to these programs. And Colleen, if I'm not reading your question correctly, please feel free to chime in.
We've been really working on providing clarity within our community of our programs. Specifically, I know a lot of providers have felt, and I've heard it myself, that, TK has been impacting their enrollment. What a lot of providers don't know is that our federal program, Head Start, and our ECAP Washington State program do not have the same enrollment regulations like TK does. Head Start and ECAP are income-based. So if I, receive an application for a little one in foster care, they automatically qualify for our programs. If a family applies for TK and they are already enrolled in one of our licensed child care providers, our director will communicate directly with them, with the provider, and let them know that the family is applying. And we are always mindful and ask, will this impact your enrollment? And if the provider says yes, which a lot of times does happen, the local YMCA childcare is one of them, then we will not enroll the child, we will waitlist them. And so I think right now, like I mentioned, our center is so new. In 2020, we made the transition. We have 4 different programs with 4 different eligibility criteria. And so I think where we need to improve is, our communication with the providers so they can gain that clarity on what our enrollment looks like and what the eligibility criteria is for each one.
Thank you, Jennifer. We have another question that has come through for the panel. So it says, how can DCYF advocate for more accountability and whole early learning systems partnership from school districts? Just kind of thinking about, what can we do as to support?
If you can eliminate licensing regulations for 4-year-olds in public schools, then you should eliminate licensing regulations for 4-year-olds in private providers programs, because I can't justify 2 separate systems for the same kids. So that's my first. I know that's kind of a, it's a flip response, but it's actually true. I mean, 4-year-old, if I'm serving a 4-year-old in my program and my teachers are subject to the rules of licensing, why is it that as soon as that 4-year-old goes to a TK program, there are no rules? So that's one way DCYF could support it. I don't know, I mean, unless you can do real systems change because of local control, because OSPI doesn't even have a lot of authority over school districts. I'd have to really think about that question. Like, how do you break through all those barriers? Cause you know how like in Washington's, in government, one department can't govern another. And so, you know, that's part of the problem. So I really would, I mean, it would take a lot more time than we have now to start having the conversation about how do you dismantle that many levels of a system to try to get at that problem.
I kind of have some thoughts on that too. And I'm not fully versed in, all the ways that TK, how that's structured for the opportunity for implementing TK. I know that in other states, they've really adopted models for TK that are like truly mixed delivery services where that kind of programming and the funding that goes along with it and the supports for families is being implemented in a variety of environments, like similar to the way ECAP slots are being contracted out. And it seems like Washington State it's limited to happening through the school districts. And so that makes me wonder, like, has there been conversation about how maybe we can implement this in more creative ways, in ways that we really are truly utilizing the existing system of childcare providers that are already here. So benefiting those providers with the additional supports and funding, and then providing families with a more, a mixed variety of options for how they can be receiving those TK services. Because I think TK on an elementary campus setting is great for some kids and families, and it's not good for all. But if that is the only way that families can access that service, like that's challenging. How can you say that we're providing family choice when the only free choice for many of those families is to do that through an elementary system? Like, that doesn't sound like a true partnership. I know, Jennifer, you had mentioned something about connecting with your community providers when they're applying for TK and making sure that's not going to impact their enrollment. And I think that is a really great way to partner with community childcare providers. And at the same time, that creates such a burden, because I can tell you, like, when my families are leaving me and moving to TK programs, while that breaks my heart and I want them to stay with me so badly, for me to prevent a barrier for that to happen, especially if I know that family could benefit from that. They're paying me a lot of money. Childcare is expensive. And so for me to prevent them to going to that service where they could be accessing something for free, that creates a burden for me. Like, so the families that have left for me, I've kind of considered the thought of calling district and saying, hey, these are the kids that you're pulling for me. They're on my enrollment list currently, and now they're scheduled to come to you. That creates a burden for me, and that's a challenge. I would say also, kind of in my region of the state, in terms of like advocating for providers, one of the challenges that we have is that our childcare aware team was, one of the biggest agencies for advocating and supporting community childcare providers, is also contracted through our ESD, who is also, and they're also tasked with helping to implement the TK programs on the elementary campuses. So I think that creates a conflict of interest for them. They can't fully advocate for childcare providers and at the same time be supporting the implementation on the campuses. Like, I think there's a huge, they've got to, mind their P's and Q's and find a way of balancing that, rather than having a really strong advocate that's on the side of the community childcare providers in our area.
Thank you, Julie. Ethna, I see your hand is up.
So a couple of things that I just want to chime in here is, and Susan mentioned this, how the early learning providers that we have out there is some excellence. I mean, some really excellent teachers, administrators, people who have spent years focusing on this age group, early childhood education. And it's a totally different kettle of fish to a kindergarten class. And I have heard from some of our TTK staff that, oh, it's just like kindergarten. It is nothing like kindergarten. These kids are they're messy. They're going to spill their milk. It's a totally different thing. And we do have the specialists already in childcare. And I think what's worked well for this one particular island up here is the connection of those providers. And I think, listening to Julie, there's some aspects she's had abilities to connect, but she's pretty isolated. And I think that if we could do something, it would be to really connect those providers in a real supportive way, not just like, oh, you can come to this meeting and listen and go. It's got to be a real supportive, tangible way. And then the reason we were successful in forwarding a TTK program here on Orcas was because we were collaborating together as an early learning community. We showed up to school board meetings. We were able to present. It took 3 requests to get to present at a board meeting, but we did, and then TTK was dropped. And I think that coordinated effort can't happen in a regular community where those providers are not coming together. And then I see in the chat here about how TTK can be in other states, is available to be shared out with the existing community programs. And that we did ask OSPI about that, because that's something that we were willing to collaborate on. Could we have, we're still bring that TTK money to our community without shutting down our providers? But if that can be changed in this state, I think that would be a great idea.
And one other point that I'd like to make to share is that not only do school districts have local control, but in Seattle, it's building control. So the relationship with your principal, if a principal values high quality early learning and school age care programs, then you have a great opportunity to work with the whole school and all that kind of. But if they don't, then it's not a great relation, and you have to fight really hard for quality spaces in the building and so on. So the levels of things that you have to go through in order to coordinate the enrollment, and with without any accountability and enforcement, I think it's a waste of money to have any office of coordinated enrollment, because it's not enforceable. So I think the whole thing that would be one other thing that DCYF could do to support providers, is actually think long and hard about how much money you're spending on coordinated enrollment when you can't enforce it.
Thank you. I wanted to thank all of our panelists who came and gave their time today, answered some questions for us. And I also want to echo the fact that as we are working together to provide more services for more children across the state, that these questions are going to continue to help us reflect and drive our goals as we move forward. Certainly as a new administrator here at DCYF, my focus and goal is to ensure that we are supporting all providers, and we're also helping to put together programming for families that is going to really meet their needs and for their children. And I certainly do appreciate all of you who came today and for this conversation. I'm sure this isn't the last one we'll have. And but just a special thank you to Ethna and to Susan and to Julie and Jennifer for coming and sharing with us today. Thank you so very much. And please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I really want to, be a leader that is easy to get a hold of. And so that is truly my goal. I would love to continue conversations with you all. And you can find me at jennifer.casarino@DCYF, just the wa.gov there on the end. And thank you again. I know that we have a couple of minutes before noon, and I believe if we want, would this be a good time if we could take a little break? And then those of us who are coming back at noon, or do you want to just keep going?
Thank you, Jennifer, for that question. We are going to continue on into our next piece. Again, as we stated, this was our longest presentation, so I did encourage folk to take care of what they needed to. So if you need to step away and go off camera, please do. We are going to be moving into the next part, but I just, before I turn everything over to Enrica, just want to ask everyone to please take a minute to complete the reflection on this portion of our agenda. The link should be in the chat, so please take a minute to do that. And I will turn the agenda over to Enrica.
Okay. Thank you, Lois. And thank you again, Jennifer, Edna, Susan, Julie, and Jennifer for sharing your perspectives and experiences. This is such an important discussion that we've been having. What I'd like to do now is introduce Melissa Cheeseman. Melissa is the Senior Policy Advisor at DCYF, and also introducing Ruben Reeves, Assistant Secretary of Licensing with DCYF. They are both here to provide us with an overview and engage us in some discussion as it relates to early learning decision packages. So Melissa and Ruben, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, I was not in the office yesterday. So when Ruben said he was not going to be able to make it, I was not able to forward on that timely correspondence. So apologies, Ruben will not be here today, but rest assured that if there are any issues, any questions, I will make sure that the team gets it and that we honor the feedback loop. With that being said, I want to thank everybody and good afternoon. As you all just heard, my name is Melissa Cheeseman. I am the Early Learning and Childcare Government Affairs Senior Policy Advisor. I work within the Office of Public Affairs here at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF. Today, I'll be presenting related early learning and care decision packages that are continuing to move forward in DCYF's development process. And I believe, I want to say, was it back in June, we came, Nicole and Ruben came to a meeting to kind of provide some rough draft decision packages. These are more of the refinements and the ones that are continuing to move forward. So I want to make that very clear that you might not be hearing some of the same things. That's because we're updating the estimates and different things. I'm also here to provide dollars and cents. So with that being said, I really do want this to be interactive. Please stop me at any time. Ask questions, provide thoughts. My goal is, of course, to present the related decision packages. And after each one, if there are thoughts or questions, please feel free. I will, of course, leave awkward silence to make sure that that happens. Also, if I can't answer questions, I will make sure we'll get those answers back to you. And then if I ask questions, this is really just me trying to make sure that as I'm taking in the feedback, that I'm understanding the feedback that's being provided. And then at the end of this presentation, there'll be another opportunity to ask questions. So if during that slide, you don't ask the question, there's always going to be more time. And then also at the end of the slide will be my email that goes directly to me. So if you have any other thoughts or questions, please contact me. So just real quickly, before we begin, the agenda today is I'm going to provide an overview of DCYF's legislative planning process, timelines, realities related to that, as well as DCYF's authorizing environment. And then I'm going to start providing information related to the early learning and decision packages, early learning and care decision packages. Before I go forward, are there any questions about anything I just mentioned or anything you are specifically curious in hearing about?
So Melissa, I just want to ask that since we have a number of folk, this is their first time attending, if you would spell out the acronyms, I believe that would be very helpful. Just a friendly reminder. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that's a great segue into my next thing I want to mention is that this presentation was also accompanied with a handout on all the acronyms that are used in this presentation. So thank you, Lois, for the reminder. Please, at any time, if there are questions about those acronyms, you can ask that as well, and I will do my best to respond. Did everyone get a copy? Can we get that handout just drop back in the chat again? Is that, if that's possible?
For sure. I'll drop it in the chat.
All right. All right. Any other questions before we move on? All right, next slide, please. So for most of you, this should look really familiar. This slide is basically a timeline, I want to say a high-level timeline overview of DCYF's legislative annual process. If you look to the very top left of the slide, you will see a reddish-orange circle around May through September. This is where we currently are. This is the time when DCYF program, budget, and policy staff are collaborating and working on developing decision packages for additional funding and any related agency request legislation. DCYF's early learning and care funding asks for the next biennium are grounded in funding policies already provided in law or to comply with federal requirements. As mentioned, this is also when policy staff and program staff, policy staff people like myself, program staff like Jennifer on the last panel, are working on developing related agency request legislation, which also needs to be submitted to the Code Revisor's Office as well as the Office of Financial Management within this time frame for supporting DCYF's related decision packages. But I think it's also important to note that, like last year, the agency request legislation development will be very limited and targeted for DCYF's entire portfolio. And for this year going forward, for the early learning and care portfolio, we don't have any agency request legislation that we're proposing. All DCYF proposals are currently going through the final development process before final submission in mid-September. This means that the proposals and concepts that are not at a certain level of completion at this point, for whatever reason, are now kind of going through the process of being removed from the list of possible DPs to move forward or decision packages to move forward. Next slide, please. So this slide provides a little more detail in the May through September as compared to the previous annual cycle slide. This is specifically for the DP and agency request development process. So if you can see here towards, I want to say off center to the right, this is the month of August. This is indicated by an orange dashed circle. This is where we currently are. At the end of June, DCYF's leadership met and decided on decision packages and agency request legislation to move forward to full development, taking these proposed concepts, like the concepts that we talked about a few months back, and creating actual decision packages with those concepts. During July, the budget and program staff will be refining and finalizing the budget estimates, of course, budget staff, as well as the narratives related to the decision packages. This is when policy staff is also vetting the related agency requests for legislation with the AG's office as well as the Code Revisor. Currently, DCYF's policy and program policy and budget staff are reviewing the DP and estimates and narratives for final submission in September to the Office of Financial Management, or OFM. DCYF's leadership is making those final decisions on DPs and which will move forward as a continuous process. So we're always constantly trying to review those things. This is also a time where DCYF is continuing to reach out and engage with our partners to collect feedback and to refine our proposals, which is why I'm here today. So next slide, please. So this slide is just even a little bit more detail specifically around August. So I won't even labor this very much, but the yellow highlight, that's precisely where we're at right now. We're just trying to finalize these. But before we do that, we also want to get, we want to not finish engagement. Engagement will continue. But as far as being able to impact what gets into the decision packages, this is the time to start saying what you like, what you don't like. And if you're not even certain, so that works too. So next slide, please. So before going over some of the realities that can impact the legislative process, which includes what DCYF will be allowed to request in the 2024-27 biennium budget, it's important first to provide information on DCYF's authorizing environment. So up until now, this presentation has really just focused on DCYF's internal planning and development process. So now I want to spend some time just really kind of drawing out the field or the playing field that we're on as far as what I would consider our authorizing environment. So as we've been developing the decision packages, we've also been working with the Office of Financial Management for guidance and feedback on issues and concepts that are deeply tethered to the decision packages, and then been working to incorporate that feedback into DCYF's asks. Once the proposals are submitted in September, OFM, or the Office of Financial Management, will review the proposals in their entirety, advise, collect additional information as needed. Then the governor's office will work through the proposals and decide which and to what extent proposals are included in the governor's budget. Once completed, the governor's budget is then published on the Office of Financial Management's website. And this is where a lot of uncertainty is, particularly for us in planning. So really noteworthy, because this is an election year, this includes the election of a new governor. A new governor and their transition team will be building a proposed budget. We also anticipate working with the incoming governor and their transition team in November and December on the budget build as well. At this time, we're estimating that the governor's budget will then possibly be published in January, which is a little bit later, I think, than normal. With that all being said, the governor's proposed budget becomes our agency, DCYF's playbook for session. And this is true for all cabinet agencies like DCYF. All this to say is that the processes may, leading up to the leg session, look a little bit different because of the elections in November, but our authorizing environment is still defined by the governor's proposed budget. Before moving on to realities that are going to be shaping, or at least what we're thinking may shape the next legislative session, I'd like to open it up for any comments or questions or thoughts. Okay, well, just checking the chat. Can you share us typically what happens? So that's a great question, Debbie. That hasn't happened in over 12 years. So for most of us, we don't know. This is kind of new territory for me specifically. And so we're guessing there could be two, but we don't know. Any other questions?
Melissa, this is Lois. I have a question over capital gains, because I know you talk, declining revenues and that type of thing. Is there any plan to, or have you talked to any legislators that are interested in changing the way that the funds are being allocated so that early learning receives more direct support in the field from those capital gains monies?
Lois, okay, so to make sure I understand the question, you're asking if anyone from DCYF, not just me, has been talking to legislators about different dedicated funding sources other than the cap gains.
Yeah, well, the cap gains now, as you know, a lot of it is also being used, which we do need, but it's always that balancing act. A way to financially support the field in a direct way. In addition to using funds to be able to make repairs at some of the K through 12 schools, which is what some of the funds are being used for, in fact, quite a bit. So how is there any talk about being able to have funds directed to providers, and direct support to be able to help folk keep their doors open because a lot of the small businesses are still reeling from the pandemic.
I have your question, Lois, and I feel like it's more than a yes or no, so we're taking it down and we'll definitely get feedback on that.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm also writing it down too, or typing. That's what all the clicking is. It's interesting because that's actually what, when we start talking about realities, and before moving on, any other questions? That's a really good one too, Lois. Thank you.
Debbie has another question in the chat.
So I'm not, okay, so the question is, will the older governor's budget be mostly used in the newer governor and their budget? I know this is insider information, but still curious. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who the new governor is going to be, and that might also change the way the individual looks and approaches the budget. Also a really great question. All right. And again, just because you're not saying it now doesn't mean you can't reach out to me later and ask a question later. So thinking and turning now to realities that shape what gets included in the budget or what's considered by the legislature when moving things forward through the process. So as you all are aware, our state operates on a biennium, which means on odd years like next year, 2025, the legislative session is going to be long. And that's because during those odd years, the legislature must decide on a biennium budget, a 2-year budget that authorizes government spending. Okay, so I want to be very clear, like that budget, it authorizes DCYF to spend money at a certain dollar amount for certain things. And that we need that budget in order to tell us what we're spending our money on, or the money that's allocated to DCYF. And so leading up to the next 2-year budget, there are some realities that will impact what gets included. And I think the first is what you all already know, is that the reality is DCYF is still continuing to implement significant policy strategies and investments, particularly in the early learning space over the last several years, but also over their entire portfolio and across the agency. A lot of you should already know that DCYF has been around for 10 years. A lot of agencies have been around much longer. And there's a lot of work that takes to be in a position to be as responsive, but also still meeting the mission and the core values of the agency. Additionally, policy direction is driven specifically by our elected officials. And this November, we'll be voting for representatives, all of our representatives, half of our senators, and for the first time in 12 years, as we just discussed a second ago, a new governor. This new administration could and will have different priorities that will impact the budget and policy priorities going forward. I think it's also important to now, again, Lois alluded to this a little bit ago, is that there's some economic outlooks that need to be considered, including declining revenue forecasts that may indicate an economic slowdown. If there is a slowdown, this can lead to more conservative decisions about how much and where to invest. So a lot of you may already be aware also that there are several ballot initiatives that will impact future revenues that the state uses to fund programs like DCYF programs. For example, there is uncertainty around the related revenues and whether they're going to still be collected through the capital gains tax, as well as the cap and gains auction revenues from the Climate Commitment Act. As you all already know, less revenues means less money to spend on government-funded programs, which means less money could end up being allocated to DCYF and its programs. So I'm going to pause there and hold for any questions. Looking through the chat. All right, next slide, please. I'll go through this really quickly since Ray earlier, tried to tether us to our strategic goals. This slide is really about how the decision packages I'm about to present live into our early learning and strategic strategies. This includes 80% of Washington children ready for being kindergarten ready, high quality learning available and affordable to all in Washington, as well as prevention as a goal and strategy when thinking about early learning and eliminating racial disproportionality and advancing racial equity in early education, a lot of which has been talked about through this meeting. And I think is really important that we continue to have conversations about that. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, this list is a little bit smaller than it was a few months ago. What you're seeing here is a list of early learning and care decision packages that I'll be presenting next. What I want to mention here is what I've mentioned before is that our funding asks here are really to meet statutory obligations for ECAP entitlement, as well as Working Connections childcare income eligibility expansion to 75% state median income, setting base rates at 85 percentile of market rates. And additionally, there are changes to CCDF rules or Child Care and Development Fund rules, federal program that require additional funding to implement and stay in compliance with. We are also requesting additional funding to create a child care compliance unit. This proposal is geared towards improved practice around licensing and compliance support for providers through program improvements and expansion. These DPs contribute to supporting Washington, developing a mixed delivery childcare system where families are able to choose from a continuum of early learning options that meet their needs, so children are supported in ways that are needed for healthy development starting from birth, and providers are supported in ways that lead towards positive outcomes for both the business and the workforce. Next slide, please. So this is about ECAP entitlement. This proposal adds approximately 6,515 ECAP slots to reach entitlement by 2026-27 school year. This request also includes funding asks for converting part day slots to school day and working day slots. It also includes a slot rate increase as well as quality supports and provider scholarships. So this is some of what also was talked about earlier in ensuring that we're asking for funding for this. So specific to converting slots, the proposal seeks to increase the day dosage or the length of day to meet ECAP entitlement to support kindergarten readiness by converting about 7,600 part day slots to about 7,500 school day slots, and then about 20, or I want to say 18 working day slots. I probably should have just provided. So it's 7,610 part day slots being converted to 7,592 school day slots and 18 working day slots. This request also seeks to increase rates to better cover provider costs by using the school day, more extensive school day and working day models. The request seeks an approximate 29% rate increase from current funding levels. DCYF is also seeking additional funding for maintaining adequate levels of quality supports that provides curriculum and ongoing assessments for classrooms and children. And then finally, this ask requests authority and spending to provide scholarships for an increased early learning workforce and to expand supports for early achievers based on an estimated workforce growth. And then just for some numbers here, the budget, the request, the ask is looking at about $456.2 million over the next biennium. And again, that's to meet entitlement, sustainable rates, part day conversions, scholarships, early achiever supports, as well as quality supports. And it's looking at also adding 25.5 full-time equivalent staff members. This is where I'd like to be able to collect more feedback. So if you have any thoughts, questions. Let's see. I'm seeing here, Lois, will most of the funds be used to convert part day to full-time slots? What is the breakdown between the various fundings? That's a great question. And I don't have the stats on me right now, but this is something we can absolutely report on. The next one is, will there be funding asked for facilities? So early learning facilities is a program through the Department of Commerce. DCYF is included in Commerce's capital funding through a provision that requires up to 4% of the competitive grants be allocated to DCYF in order to provide pre-licensing support, as being able to, get through that licensing process and be able to apply for those loans. Those are very much dependent on each other. So DCYF doesn't specifically have a decision package ask to expand facilities, but we did get funding, or we're being awarded funding, and I think this was presented the last meeting from the Bomber Group, related to what can DCYF do to help get more facilities built and on the ground. And I don't have all the details on that, but we can also get more information on that if you're interested in that, Amy. Any other questions, thoughts? All right. So I've got that. So next slide, please. Just want to make sure I get that. All right, so the next one is specifically for Working Connections childcare to increase eligibility to 75% state median income beginning July 2025, as required by RCW 43.216.802. I'm smiling because the recodification from 211 finally just happened, the reorg. And so all Working Connections childcare statutes are now in the 800 level of the provisions. Just thought I'd add that part. Anyway, so so if any of you are curious, that's where you'll find them now in statute. So additionally, DCYF is requesting funding to increase the dual language rate to adjust for inflation as required by RCW 43.216.775. Specific to Working Connections childcare eligibility expansion to 75% state median income. DCYF is estimating that access to Working Connections childcare would expand to approximately 8,000 families, which could theoretically add 13,000 or approximately 13,500 additional children into benefit subsidy programs. CCDF, or again, Child Care and Development Fund program rules require establishing a new copay tier between 75 and 85% state minimum income at no more than 7% of a family's income. So the decision package also includes an ask around establishing a second tier eligibility at 80% state median income. The result of which would be a max copay of $350 per month, or approximately 6.8% of gross monthly income. The copay statute would be found under RCW 43.216.804. So additionally, the second second tier eligibility at 80% state median income allows families to have some income growth and still retain childcare at reapplication. The request also seeks additional funding for outreach and support for Working Connections eligible families. And then finally, DCYF is also requesting additional funding to increase, like I said, the dual language rate, and where the estimate is based on the U.S. implicit price deflator. So for this specific ask, DCYF is asking for $268.1 million over the biennium. And again, that's to fund the inflation for the increase in dual language rate, as well as expanding income eligibility. This request also includes 40 full-time equivalent staff to meet the demand. Any questions, thoughts, looking at the chat now?
Melissa, I didn't have a chance to put this in the chat, but well, Colleen has a question, and then mine too is as soon as I saw this, became concerned because we already know that the current state reimbursement rates are less than many providers' private rate. So how do we balance more parents becoming eligible with the difference between private rate and state reimbursement rates, and how that's going to impact providers being able to make budget and that type of thing? We want to support families, but we also have to ensure that small businesses that do this work are able to keep their doors open. So I'm just trying to figure out what research was done to ensure that this change will not have unintentional consequences on the field.
Well, as far as research done, let me just write this down. So I will need to, I'm just writing this down because I want to make sure so I will need to reach out with program staff to get a better understanding of all the different things that they researched in putting together the decision package, because that starts with program staff. But to be very clear, this specific DP is absolutely tethered to what's required in statute. So if you go to RCW 43.216.802, subsection 3, it says beginning July 1st, 2025, income eligibility is at or below 75% state median income. So we have to, if we don't ask for this, then we won't have funding to ensure the expanded access for families and children. So I want to make sure that's very clear that this is something that's tethered to underlining statute, and is something that we have to ask for if we're going to be able to provide those benefits to children and families. But I will make sure we follow through with an answer or response to your question, Lois. Colleen, or does that make sense, Lois, before I move on?
Hi, Melissa. Yes, it does.
Awesome.
So I
Thank you.
appreciate you following up on it, though.
Absolutely. All right. And then Colleen, you had a question.
Yeah, Melissa, when you shared the total package amount here, my question was just if this is an increase in spending on subsidy, or if that will be then the full budget for the biennium for subsidy.
That's a really great question. So this is an additional funding request. So this would be built on top of what DC already has as his base. So this is just an additional request. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. That's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? Just looking at the chat. I think we're good.
Melissa, I did have another question that I did flag that it's fine if you want to do that as follow-up, as it's not legislative, but just wondering if DCYF is tracking how many families are qualifying for working connections and whether or not those families ever actually get services with a provider. So as we look at increasing, eligibility for the families, what is the reality of those families actually getting service? You know, are there enough providers and enough subsidy slots within our existing programs to actually meet the need of increasing that amount? I just think that's a key piece as we move forward in planning for state spending.
I think that's also a really great question. And I think that's one of the reasons why what's built into this decision package is more outreach. And I believe there's also a possible contract built in to help with that outreach so that we're getting this information to more and more families, getting it in their hands to determine whether they're eligible or not. So this is the realities of, yes, we're asking for more, and what is the impact? I think that's a really great question, Colleen. And we will also make sure to get some follow-up on that. All right, any other questions? I see here in the chat, Debbie, the subsidy rate is not based on the cost of quality care. That is the next that's the next slide, a little ahead of me, but yes, that you're taking some of the gas out of my tank, but you're right, it is not based on the cost of quality of care going forward. That is something we're about ready to talk about. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so for base rates, Washington has a long history of investing in quality and access. Washington has built a strong foundation of quality and diversity in early learning and education system. DCYF is required by RCW 43.216.828 to recommend base rates to the legislature that achieve the 85th percentile of market rates. This law also requires in parallel for DCYF to work and create and develop a cost model, which has been created, also communicated via what is it? Distribution list or I can't remember. Last week, the report was provided. The cost of quality care study and market rate survey, say that 12 times fast, was published last week. I've dropped a PDF version of that in the chat to kind of, it frames the work that has been done and lives into this statute. But DCYF is recommending rates based on the 2024 market rate survey in the next biennium, based on guidance provided by the Office of Financial Management. The proposed recommendations seeks to set base rates, again, to achieve the 85th percentile as required by law. This increase, and this next part, if you want more information, it is absolutely in the report. This is where I believe this information is coming from. I also just got this from program staff. So if not, let me know and I'll provide more information on this as well. But the increase that is effective for July 2025, based on that 85th percentile of market rates, will increase most rates on average by 27% statewide. So if you're going to compare the rates that DCYF is recommending based on 85th percentile of the market rates to what would have been produced using the same region subsidy methodology for the cost of quality care, what you would be looking at is the infant rate that's being proposed is only 62% of the cost of quality care rate. For the toddler rate, 73% of the cost of quality care. For preschool age children, sorry, I got that backwards. For toddlers, it's 73. For school age children, preschool age children, it is 75% of the cost of quality care. And for school age children, you're looking at rates that are about 95% of the cost of quality of care. I think this really does paint the picture that school age children tend to be closer to price, whereas the younger our little ones are, the more rates are inadequate for ensuring that providers are being compensated for the services and the education that they're providing to these children. With that being said, the funding to increase subsidy rates to the 85th percentile does support approximately 30,000 families and 51,000 children initially. The number of families and providers are estimated to continue to increase as subsidy eligibility expands, beginning in July 2025 and again in July 2027. We're estimating that the increase in base rates would impact approximately 1,600 licensed centers and 2,400 licensed home providers in the next biennium. With that being said, this seeks an additional $298.3 million over the next biennium. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions, looking in the chat. Isn't there an updated CCDF requirement, 100% market requirement? I'm not aware of that, Lois. I'm not aware that there is a requirement for 100% through the CCDF for rate reimbursement, but I'm going to add that to the list of questions. And then Debbie, can you state the requested funding amount? It's also provided in the, so each one of these slides, I also included presenter notes so that you would all have the numbers in front of you too. It's estimated at $298.3 million over the biennium. So that's over the 2 years. And then what about prospective? Okay, so that's CCDF changes, which is going to be in a separate decision package than increasing base rates. All right, and I think my next slide is going to be on CCDF, so that's very timely, Kathy. All right, thank you. So, again, all the gas out of my tank. No, I'm kidding. It's fine. It just means you all are very much informed and it makes this even easier, for me anyway. So effective April 30th, 2024, the Child Care and Development Fund program provided new requirements that impact DCYF and the programs we provide, and we must comply with. These changes seek to expand access, affordability, and availability of child care subsidy benefits to eligible children and families. While the federal government did provide some funding to support this work, it's not nearly enough to fund the cost of compliance. So with that being said, that's why DCYF is requesting additional funding to implement the following new requirements. And without this funding, DCYF will not be able to comply. So that includes being able to pay providers based on enrollment instead of attendance. Additionally, DCYF must pay prospectively rather than retrospectively, or in other words, pay in advance of the care rather than after providing the care, which is in alignment with the way that families pay for their care. The next thing is be able to provide early childhood education services through grants and contracts for underserved geographic areas, infants and toddlers, and children with disabilities, and to allow for a full 12 months authorization when a new child is added during an established authorization period. And so specific to this ask, over the next biennium, DCYF would need, DCYF is asking for $94.9 million and an additional 4 full-time equivalent staff members. I'm going to pause now and see if we have any questions. Whoops, where did the chat go? If anyone has any thoughts. Okay. All right, so next slide, please. So this is the last one on the list, and the last decision package I'll be presenting today. DCYF is requesting additional funding for 20 full-time employees or equivalents to create a child care complaint unit. This practice change and expansion of workforce will streamline investigation processes, streamline workload and systems, and create consistent practice and improve provider experience. This will improve the quality and intention of DCYF's licensing practice and improve the quality and availability for provider services and align with division and program goals. DCYF's child care licensing uses a progressive enforcement strategy, emphasizing the use of technical assistance as the first level of provider supports. Licensors are also responsible for monitoring compliance while also inspecting licensing complaints. The compliance and complaint workload activities limit licensors' abilities to, and opportunity, frankly, to provide adequate and culturally responsive technical assistance. This proposal creates a licensing complaint unit separate from the compliance unit or monitoring work to address licensing complexities, serve as licensed providers, or be able to serve licensed providers statewide equitably, maintain equitable workloads for licensors internal to DCYF, provide separation of duty that reduces the risks of bias and conflicts of interest, having to manage both workloads, and enable staff to meet timelines and support licensed providers more holistically. This ask over the biennium is about 5.5 million, and I've also included what that annual will look like, what the annual ask would be specifically, as it really does relate to the 20 FTE equivalent staff members. And so now I'm going to go ahead and pause there and see if there are any other questions. Okay, so the question here from Lois, why the request for new staff members? What will change internally? Wouldn't be able to pay providers upfront for software. Wouldn't be able to pay providers upfront for software. Can you, Lois, can you provide just a little more context?
Yeah, sorry about that, Marlene. Now that, I mean, Melissa, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I was wearing my other hat and messaging Marlene about something, so forgive me. But I can also ask you about that too. You had mentioned, Melissa, that the numbers are in the presenter version of your PowerPoint. Just wondering if you could share that with Marlene so we can share it out with folk. And so then to my question, why the request for new staff to be able to fund the change to pay folk at the beginning of the month? Wouldn't this simply be a software change to the way that providers are paid as opposed to needing new staff? So just wondering if you can explain why staff are needed to move from the end of the month to the beginning.
I think that's a really another really great question, and I will make sure to get a more complete answer to you, Lois, because I know each one of the decision packages have an analysis, essentially holistically, the different divisions that support this work, including IT. And I believe that this ask includes IT, like IT staff members to help support this ask. So every software change, there's always a person behind it. There's also, I think for a lot of these FTEs, if we're looking at expanded workload, then we need more staff to be able to support that workload, is the also other ask. And I think there's been kind of, if you think about state government in general, and this is more Melissa, and so please take this with a grain of salt. Something that I've seen that's maybe not just rampant in DCYF is just this. Oftentimes when there's this ask, we're looking at just the dollars and not necessarily the people that are needed to support those initiatives, right? Organizations don't exist without people. Processes don't exist without people. ELAC doesn't exist without people, and it's people that make the work happen. And oftentimes it's that work that's not always funded to the extent that it should be. And a great example of that is last session, we had 5774, right? This is the background check. We need 7 offices. DCYF should be providing background check fingerprinting services in 7 offices. prioritizing areas where there's not convenient locations. We got funding for, of the 7 FTs to make that work, we got funding for maybe 1 and almost 2. And so what I'm saying to you is, like, if we set the intention that we need this many, it's very likely we're going to get some other amount. And then that just causes this, you know, moving forward snowball of never having enough people to do the responsive work necessary to do the work. So I definitely stand behind the estimates that staff put together here. But generally speaking, it's to support the process. It's to support the workload and to support the growth, as well as having the people to create the software development that would be necessary to interact with the systems properly. And I'm sorry if that was soapboxy. Please forgive me. Any other questions? Looking here at the chat again. Okay, regarding outreach to increase working connections childcare, will funding be available to community and community-based partners? I will look into that, Debbie, and we will get a response. I don't have the DP open in front of me right now, but that seems like something we can answer. All right, last slide, please.
I have a follow-up question to that as well. If there is an increased partnership with communities around the state, around outreach, and any programming, will there be an increase in your contract department staff so that contracts can get out in a reasonable time frame?
That's another really, you just reinforced what I just said. I really appreciate that, Debbie. I don't know, right? So contracts are really important, making sure that they're done. Like, there's a lot of laws that state government have to follow for that. I'm writing down the question now and making sure, like, that when we're thinking about that, especially when we're planning, that that's being considered in the planning, or if there are discussions about budget items in the future or during the legislative process, that we're also advocating for that as well. But I'm hearing you. Thank you, Debbie. All right, everyone. Well, this is the end of the slide. And I can also drop in the chat. Let me just drop that in the chat, is my email address. Please contact me anytime if you have any additional thoughts about this presentation. If there's something that you'd like more information on, or if you just want to reach out, please reach out anytime. And thank you, everybody. Also, if you have any other last thoughts or questions, I'm still here and available.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And I think, Lois, were you going to wrap things up, or did you want me to do so?
Well, Enrica, we can tag team. How's that?
Sounds good. Why don't you start?
All righty. Well, first, we'd like for everyone, want to thank you for sharing information to share in a short period of time. We look forward to hearing your responses and reading them in the feedback loop. I want everyone to please take a moment to complete the reflection that we have the link there. We also have, would like for you to respond to the Mentimeter. And the question is, overall, I felt today's meeting was productive and a good use of my time. So if you can please click on that and share your response, that would be great. Are Our next meeting is report development session on August 13th. And the next public meeting for ELAC is scheduled for October 1st. Enrica?
I think you covered everything here. We do still have a few minutes left, and I see Melissa's still here. So, if folks still have some questions, we can certainly take a few minutes to you share out questions. Otherwise, thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules for our ELAC meeting today. And we look forward to seeing you for our report session on August the 13th.
And if you haven't had an opportunity to respond to the reflections, they are also in the chat. So we have the Survey Monkey there, the Mentimeter. So please respond to both. And again, thanking all of our guests from DCYF. Jennifer, I see you're still here. Thank you very much. Our panel members, for those who were still able to remain. Of course, I know Ray had to leave, but I know the CE team will thank him for participating.
And thank you, Erin, for putting that Menti in the chat. I think that might help folks. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Please enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Lois. Thank you, Enrique. Enrique, I really had a good time. I'm sorry. We don't ever get to really cross each other's paths very much since the first time. And it sounds like we're not really going to anymore either, going forward, at least just in the meetings. So.
Oh, well,
But we
Melissa,
still have a little time, but we can
we have a
always.
little time.
Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
we should set up something. I want you both to meet Courtney Parker. I just hired her. I want to say mid last month. She's our new policy advisor. She'll be also helping with early learning and care. She comes from a Montessori school. She'll also be helping us review staff qualifications and staff development work that I think is coming up here pretty soon. So just wanted to make sure you both knew that as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa.
Hey, very
Well,
nice to meet you.
Yeah, hi
Nice
Lois,
to
hi
meet you, Courtney.
Henrika. Yeah, thank you. It was a wonderful meeting to attend. Yeah, I was at a licensed childcare center for about 7 years and loved it. So yeah, it was such a pleasure to be at this meeting.
Well, thank you for being here. So Melissa will have to set something up so we can formally, meet Courtney and talk. And it'll be good to talk about especially the, as we reach the education cliff, to talk about PACE and some of the other things that, Enrica, I don't even know if you've I haven't had a chance to update you, had a meeting with Tiffany regarding PACE and basically the lack of availability across the state and how it's so easy to tell folk that, oh, just do PACE, as well as the fact that PACE is way more challenging than what was anticipated, Enrica, and that they're utilizing the University of Washington to pull together the curriculum. And the whole point of having a community-based pathway is that it was supposed to be something that was easily accessible and that would allow folk to have the main skills that they needed without feeling that they are in a college classroom. And I believe that DCYF has currently that aspect of it needs some improvement.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to talk about that.
I know DCYF is excited to start doing this work as well. And I know it would not be, I honestly don't believe it would be moving as quickly if it wasn't for groups like ELAC, making sure that that is center stage. as far as DCYF's consideration. So I appreciate that. And I know all the people you represent absolutely appreciate that as well.
Well, and on the Democratic side, I just want to point out that one of the things, our new I'm sorry, for those who are Democrats, the VP candidate in Minnesota removed the college requirement for 75% of state hired workers to be able to open up the avenue for folk who may have worked in the field for a number of years, but may not have that degree to be able to access those jobs that provide great benefits and all the other things that come with working for state or federal government. So, you know, I am hopeful that that is something that our state can look in, especially around early learning as we look at these community-based pathways for teachers.
And actually, I know that the state, as far as state employment, has been looking at removing where possible or providing alternative experience in position description. So in order to work for the state, you have what's considered a position description. It basically describes all the duties this person could possibly be asked to do, even percentages of time, depending on if you're a covered employee. And it includes required education and or working experience. And one of the projects that I know has been worked on is also recognizing equivalent working experience to educational experience. The other thing is, I believe state HR is about ready to